and timely topic, leadership in education and its role in fostering inclusion. My name is Jasna Kovacevic, and I will be moderating today's launching event. This discussion builds on the theme of the 2024-25 Global Education Monitoring Report, which highlights the importance of educational leadership in creating equitable, inclusive environments for learners. The regional edition we are launching today is developed in partnership between the GEM report and the Network of Education Policy Centers. Across Central and Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, schools have made commendable efforts to foster inclusive teaching and learning environments. Yet, societal perspectives can sometimes clash with these inclusive values, creating challenges for schools in fostering an environment where every child feels safe and valued. This tension can lead to feelings of isolation, exclusion, and unfortunately, rising instances of bullying and discrimination. However, school leaders who proactively promote inclusive practices play a pivotal role in encountering these issues. By championing diversity and belonging, they can create a positive and welcoming atmosphere for children of all backgrounds, whether they speak a different language, have recently immigrated, belong to a minority ethnic group, or live with a disability. I have had the opportunity to contribute as a part of a research team conducting a study to inform the GEM Regional Edition being launched today. As a scholar specializing in education and leadership, I found it particularly insightful to observe the enthusiasm, commitment, and engagement of educational leaders across the participating countries. Their proactive approach to addressing emerging challenges highlights the critical role of leadership in fostering inclusive and resilient educational systems. Over the next hour, we'll explore the critical role of leadership in building inclusive school communities and ensuring every child feels safe and they belong. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation. We invite those online to use the report's hashtag Lead for Learning to join the discussion and react to the findings you hear today. You can follow us today live either in Russian or English, and also international sign language interpretation using the translation globe at the bottom of your screen if you are joining us via Zoom. Let's first hear some welcome remarks from UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Education, Stefania Giannini.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear participants. And let me say that I'm very happy, delighted to join you all for the launch of the 2025 Global Education Monitoring Report, regional edition, as already just mentioned by Jasna, for Central and Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. Well, like the global edition, this report focuses on a very important topic, leadership in education. In particular, particularly, it looks how school leaders can drive inclusion. Let me say a few words on why leadership matters for inclusion. Schools across this region have made progress in reducing discrimination, in admissions and teaching. But inclusion is about more than policies. Inclusion is about belonging. And too many students still feel out, still feel excluded or unsafe at school, especially those with disabilities, those from minority backgrounds, or those who don't speak the language of instruction. Well, social tensions and bullying remain serious challenges in this context. And this is why school leadership is so important. When school leaders champion inclusion, they somehow shape the culture of their schools. They influence their teachers. They influence students and also families and parents. And they can turn policy into practice. They empower teachers, they engage families, and advocate for system-wide change. So this is really a crucial role. And over the last 3 decades, countries in this region have seen major transformations in education. As we all know, throughout these changes, school leaders have been at the very center, at the core of this process of transformation, driving reform, resilience, and progress. But leading for inclusion is another story. Leading for inclusion is not easy. Many school leaders lack training and support. They struggle with limited resources and growing responsibilities. And in some countries, most school leaders say inclusion is easier in theory than in practice. Collaboration is often missing, and that's another missing part of the story. Less than half of leadership training programs focus on working with teachers, even though this is key to inclusion. Yet, across the region, we see inspiring leaders who go beyond their roles. They engage families, they push for policy changes, and they build schools where every child feels valued. I think that this webinar is a great opportunity to hear from those leaders. Over the next hour, we'll listen to school and system leaders who are making inclusion a reality, answering very simple questions, but very important questions, like, for instance, what does it take to lead for inclusion in schools? How can we support school leaders to create inclusive learning environments? And most importantly, what actions can we take together to make real change? This discussion, as you all know, is just the start. The findings and recommendations in the report must lead to concrete action. National and regional dialogues will follow, and your engagement today will help shape this process. I encourage you all to take part in this discussion. I encourage all of you asking questions, share ideas, and explore together how we can all together support inclusive school leadership. I thank you very much. Back to you, Jana.
Thank you, Stefania. We must too pay recognition to all those partners championing the values of inclusive education at the local, national, regional, and global levels. This feels like a good moment, therefore, to hear from the GEM Reports Director Manos Antoninis and Lana Jurko, Executive Director of the Network of Education Policy Centers, for the first ever presentation of the new GEM Regional Edition.
Thank you, Jasna, and thank you, colleagues, for joining us today for this first of the series of regional editions on a very, very important topic. As you have heard, I think, from Stefania, this is a topic that matters, and we really wanted to make sure with Lana's team support the importance of this topic comes out strongly and inspires education systems to work on them. Let me share with you a few slides that we will share also with Lana on how we have approached this topic in this regional edition. Let me first start by saying that, to elaborate a little bit more, that this is, of course, part of the cycle on leadership that started on the 31st of October last year, the theme of the last Global Education Monitoring Report that looked at issues of leadership at all levels, from the school and especially inside the school, through the system, and up to the political level, all those people who influence others in which direction our education systems should be moving. And we felt it was important to link this edition, this global report, with this regional edition that we collaborated with the Network of Education Policy Centers back in 2020-2021, and also with the European Agency on Special Needs and Inclusive Education, when we covered the topic of inclusion throughout this vast region, which is, of course, very, very diverse, but it had a legacy. There was one important historical reason that was bringing them together. During the time that they were socialist states, there was a widespread practice of exclusion, especially on the issue of special education needs and disability. So we wanted to document at that time how countries had progressed over a period of 30 years and had made really major strides. One extra thing to add is that the global report called Lead for Learning inevitably focuses on one, perhaps the most important outcome, which is learning outcomes, whether children learn what is expected, but sometimes there's a tendency to narrow down on what we mean with learning. Children and young people learn many things in schools, but in our efforts to summarize and quantify that, we often limit it to measurable learning outcomes, and often in a relatively small number of topics. So we wanted to, in this publication, to draw attention to an outcome that is often very difficult to measure, and yet it is extremely important, and that is inclusion. And that's, as I will explain at the end, throughout our regional publications. The report is based on 8 country case studies: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Estonia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, the Republic of Moldova, Poland, and Slovenia. And it is reports, country case studies that are focused on a review of the literature, on interviews and focus group discussions with key informants, but also surveys, quite extensive, with large samples of head teachers themselves. There's also one technical paper, Jasna referred to that, that's essentially tried to group together and extract some of the most important analytical findings from the case studies. But we also built on the work that we prepared for the global report. As you may know, since the 2020 cycle, we review all the countries' laws and policies on the issue. In this case, we have reviewed and we have updated in some cases how countries approach leadership and inclusion issues through our peer work, the peer country profiles, and the website that you can find. And with that brief introduction, I'll pass the micro to Lana, who is going to take us through some of the inspiration for this report. Lana.
Thank you very much, Manos. Of course, I'm very happy to be here today. Network of Education Policy Centers, together with the GEM report team, worked for the last year and a bit on these findings. And we are, of course, very happy to be able to present and launch the report today. So I will take you through the context and where we are considering inclusion and then leadership for inclusion in the region. Starting with a very commendable thing that has been done in the last 35 years. So in the last 35 years, educational systems in the region had made efforts to prevent discrimination in admissions and teaching and have made really significant strides in addressing these challenges, especially for students with disabilities. One of the striking examples that we can see is in Moldova, who has reduced the share of students with disabilities in special schools from 77% in 2005-2006 school year to just 5% in 2023-2024 school year. This marks a commendable achievement, and it showcases what focused effort and commitment can achieve. Yet despite these advancements, social and political tensions continue to challenge efforts to promote true inclusion. We need to have the same focus, effort, and commitment to breaking those barriers as well. For example, for those students who do not speak the language of instruction at home, whether because they belong to a minority ethnic group or have recently immigrated, and in the region on average, it's 8% of 15-year-olds. In Estonia, the situation is even more pronounced, with 1 in 3 students facing this challenge, while at the same time, the Estonian policy is regressing on this. Data shows that, and the graph shows it on our slide, that students from linguistic minorities in our region are less likely to feel a sense of belonging and are more likely to be bullied, which is, of course, number 1. For inclusion, feeling of belonging, and of course, feeling safe in your school environment. Our schools must adapt to celebrate and embrace linguistic diversity rather than view it as a hindrance. Also, ethnic disparities remain another area of concern in the region. This is especially pronounced among the Roma population, where Roma children in the region still have lower education outcomes. In Albania, about 1 in 2 Roma children drop out of school, while in Bosnia and Herzegovina, only half of the school-age Roma children attend the first grade of primary education. Migration and displacement also play a pivotal role in shaping the dynamic of our classrooms. And for instance, in 2024, 25% of Polish classrooms had at least 1 Ukrainian migrant or refugee student. It is imperative that we foster an inclusive environment where all students feel safe, respected, and welcomed. But to move towards truly inclusive schools, as has already been mentioned, we must prioritize inclusive leadership. School leaders play a pivotal role in advocating for inclusive values and practices. Effective leaders articulate a vision that celebrates diversity and promote individualized education that is adapted to specific learners' needs, including individuals' learning plans, flexible curricula, and assessment. They also must be open to cooperation and building partnership with parents, local communities, and others. And number one, they must be committed to the development of their teachers and other staff in school in view of what their school needs. The path to inclusivity is fraught with challenges, as we know, and our data shows that motivated and committed school leaders can create supportive learning environments. Yet school leaders in the region have varying attitudes towards inclusion. For example, in Albania, Estonia, and Slovenia, school leaders do show commitment to inclusion, but still over 60% of school leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Estonia believe that inclusion is more effective in theory than in practice, while in Moldova, nearly half of the school principals questions the practicality of inclusive education. On the other hand, leaders face serious obstacles, and in Albania and Kyrgyzstan, almost 90% of school principals cite a shortage of qualified and competent teachers as a barrier to inclusive education. This raises an urgent need for our education system to invest in building capacity within our schools and systems. Of course, the knowledge and expertise of our school leaders is crucial, yet many school leaders start their role without any pre-service or induction training at all. And while 65% of countries mandate some pre-service training for school principals, the topic of inclusion is overlooked in most countries, and we only have a few examples where inclusion is part of their preparation phase. The TALIS report highlighted that 16% of lower secondary principals felt unprepared to teach in multicultural, multilingual settings. 24% expressed the need for better training on how to support learners with special needs. So we really need to work on preparing our school leaders for inclusion. Also, in reviewing the principal preparation and professional development progress across 17 countries, we found that only 28% covered essential leadership dimensions crucial for fostering inclusive environments, such as setting expectation, focusing on learning, fostering collaboration, and developing people. In view of all these findings, we're very, of course, pleased that our report also has very concrete recommendations. So I pass it on to Manos to present those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lana. And indeed, we're used to stories about leadership to be focused around narratives of leaders who are charismatic, really changing the environment around them. But we also are aware that often this is not enough guidance for education systems to find ways forward. It's not that easy to know always who these people are and how they can help. Many of these skills remain often tacit and not necessarily visible. So we need to make efforts to bring those people with the right skills to take on these positions. Now, one of the 4 recommendations of this report, which is aligned also with the global recommendation, is that school leaders need to be trusted and empowered. The issue of autonomy, of course, has become a major one in education debates in recent years. Not all countries offer these possibilities for school leaders, and yet we know from the research literature that only when there is some autonomy and leaders have the capacity to take decisions and the opportunity to take these decisions, is it possible for their skills to be mobilized in the right direction. Of course, we also know that autonomy in itself will be insufficient unless it is supported by other measures, that there are clear roles and expectations for school leaders' scope of action, that there are adequate, timely, predictable, and equitable resources, which is often not the case, and that at the same time there is accountability for the use of resources, although the report reminds ourselves that we need to avoid excesses, because there is a tendency to pile up responsibilities with high stakes accountability on people in many countries, and that leads to burnout and other negative impacts. One of the examples that the report uses is from the Ljubljana municipality in Slovenia, where schools receive resources that they can use to support personnel needs for inclusion, which, as we know, are quite extensive. The second and third recommendation focus on the need for professionalizing school principals. This region is, of course, a region where there is essentially a universal application of open competitive recruitment, which is not something we find in other parts of the world. But still, the region is similar to the rest of the world in the sense that only a third of countries require management experience. And we know that this is a prerequisite because, of course, school leaders should be teachers, but it's the case that it's not necessarily the case that the best teachers make the best principals. Management experience is key. Another issue where the report draws attention is that the selection processes do not very frequently assess candidates' preparedness to focus on inclusion. And even where they do, there are still insufficient application of the spirit of that. So, for example, Georgia assesses attitudes, favorable attitudes towards inclusion, but not the knowledge of the applicants. The Moldovan system assesses these factors, but only with respect to disability and special education needs. Kyrgyzstan only looks at these characteristics for principles of special schools and not of mainstream schools. So these are issues where countries can make considerable progress by putting more emphasis on. But there's also the issue of looking at inclusion from a different angle. School principals ideally should represent the population. And yet we have gaps. Of course, the well-known gap is on the probability that women become school principals. Of course, the majority of teachers are women in the region, but there's a considerable gap when it comes to women taking also the principals' roles. But more explicitly, we only found Hungary, Romania, Serbia, and Slovakia having measures to promote diversity in recruitment of principals. The third recommendation, we already heard that also from Stefania and from Lana, it's the need to better prepare school leaders to promote inclusion. Only about half of the countries have professional standards and competency frameworks for school leaders, and that is even less likely to include explicit recommendations on inclusion. Even pre-service training is not mandatory in some countries. For example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Estonia, and Kyrgyzstan, among those that we focus on in this particular report. There are some good examples. Albania's 9-month initial teacher education program is aligned with the recently developed school leadership standards and includes a focus on instructional leadership. Inclusion is mandatory as well in this training program, although as I mentioned earlier, also in the Moldovan example, it only covers special education need issues, whereas we try to remind our readers that inclusion concerns are broader. Slovenia's 1-year headship license program also has a compulsory module that addresses inclusion and emphasizes leadership in environments with diverse student populations in the broader sense, not just the special needs, but also students who are poor or migrants. Finally, and you heard that already, inclusion really thrives through collaboration. As I mentioned before, we should not think of school leaders, especially those that promote inclusion, often in the face of considerable opposition from their local communities, as heroes. We need to make sure that they're supported, that they share their responsibilities and their tasks with others, because they have to work with others. Assistant principals and teachers can support them. Students can be active leaders to promote inclusion, and I think we'll hear also from some of the examples coming up today. Parents and community members must contribute to school success, and that also includes collaborating with people also and experts outside the education community. A lot of social services need to also be mobilized, and school leaders need to be prepared for how to interact and get support from these experts. Yet, less than half of the professional standards that exist in the region currently require principles to promote teacher cooperation. So these are our recommendations. I would like to close by reminding you what I said in the beginning, that this series of regional editions is trying to emphasize some very important education outcomes that we tend to neglect when we speak about outcomes in education. This is the first regional edition. Will focus on inclusion. It will be followed by regional edition on Latin America that will delve in more depth in the issue of sharing responsibilities, how school leaders embrace a more democratic, let's say, school management approach. That will come in April. Later in the summer, we will turn into the third very important education outcome, and that is digital transformation. We know that more and more pressure is put on school leaders to help implement national reforms in this area. We will look at the specific cases of East Asia with 3 case studies on China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. And towards the end of the year, our African edition, the Spotlight series, will focus on instructional leadership for early grade learning, because that entails a lot of inclusion issues that we often also forget. Last but not least, the youth report will focus on our youth and student leadership initiatives. Currently, there is a review ongoing with a survey administered to governments that will inform this publication, and a gender report that will look at the issue I mentioned before on women's leadership role in education. With that, I would like to thank you very much for being here with us today. You can use this QR code for access to the leadership cycle, and we look forward to hearing now more from our esteemed panels and experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lana and Manos. I feel hopeful and really looking forward to other regional reports. Inclusive schools need inclusive leaders. Besides training, school leaders need to be trusted and empowered, and we've seen this in our report, to be recruited with inclusion in mind, to promote and cultivate collaboration. We can all contribute in our own way to lead for inclusion. We know from what Manos and Lana just told us that the success of inclusive practices hinges on a supportive context, including social and cultural norms, effective governance systems, and robust framework of legislation, policies, and adequate preparation. This is a perfect moment, therefore, to invite our next 3 speakers. First, we have João Costa, Director of European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, with us this afternoon. Hello, João. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. I have a question for you. How is the agency working with its 31 member countries from all across Europe is leading for inclusion?
Thank you, Jasna. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this launch. I'd like to congratulate UNESCO, especially Stefania and Manos and the whole team for this very important report. It's really a moment of follow-up on the steering of SDG 4 and on the conclusions of the education summit that UNESCO organized a couple of years ago. So it's very good to see all these results. As you said in your interventions, leadership is important, but it has to be effective because leaders are not just the ones who are responsible, but they also can be the leaders of change. But for that, they cannot be left alone. They need support. They need continuity. I found it very interesting in the report that you expand the notion of leadership. You're talking even at the leadership of ministers, policymakers, but that there is a big focus at the local level, because as you show in the report, policymakers come and go, but school leaders tend to be much more stable, so they can really be the actors and the agents of change. In my short intervention, I'd like to remind you of some of the characteristics of inclusive education systems as they stand, and addressing your specific question, Jasna, as they stand in our view and in our position policy at the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education. Also mentioning that when we work with our 31 members and when we hear the concerns and the burning issues at the ministries, we are always talking about a shared vision, but we are tackling the difficult issue of implementation. And for effective implementation, we need concrete policies, we need concrete support, we need measures and actions that can be taken to support whoever is working in the schools. So currently we're putting a bit focus on the work, on the collaborative work with our members, on the issue of implementation, on the issue of monitoring, on the issue of sustainability. So as I think we all share, we can say that education systems are inclusive when they foster and promote and act on the participation of learners. By participation, we mean participation in mainstream schools, participation in classes together with everyone. And for this, we need leaders who have this vision, who share these values, who promote democratic leadership, because we cannot think of participation of learners if they are not engaged themselves in the leading of the school. And also leaders who trust the evidence. We have evidence, and UNESCO, our agency, has evidence that learners learn better when they are included. And so this is no longer a matter of opinion, this is a matter of effective evidence, of academic evidence on this. A second dimension and characteristic is the response to intervention. And this means that if we, and Manos said this very clearly, if we only focus on outcomes, we tend to have a leadership focusing on remediation. But remediation tends to fail. And so we have to focus not only on we have to focus not on the failure of learners, but we have to focus on the learner's potential. And for this, we need to work on preventative measures. And this also invites us all to think of what we're talking about. We're talking about quality education. Quality education systems are preventative, they focus on potential, and the big measure is how many students are included. A third dimension I'd like to focus on is that an inclusive education model is non-referential. We do not need to talk about clinical referencing because, as many of you already mentioned, we are talking about disability, but we are talking about socioeconomic disadvantage. We are talking about ethnic or migrant backgrounds. We are talking about language issues. And for this means that the school leaders need to be flexible and need to be able to implement flexible curricula and flexible models in school management. In other words, we need to support school leaders to be creative and to be adaptive to the specific needs of every learner that may enter their school. And finally, I'd like to focus on three areas that are characteristic of inclusive education systems and inclusive schools. The fact that we work with multi-level approach in multidisciplinary ways, and that we have to practice a whole school approach to inclusion. And this means that schools can and have to be organized in a different way. Teachers have to work in teams. The curriculum has to be seen as a whole and not just as a set of disciplines. We have to refuse standardized models and to really work on the specificity of each local community. And we need to work a lot, as this was mentioned in one of your recommendations, on collaboration, cross-sectoral, in-school collaboration, and collaboration with the families. For this, we need to support the leaders, and I'd like to draw your attention to some of the work that the agency developed in the past on an activity called Supporting Inclusive Leadership. And this has turned in a set of practical tools that can be used for the follow-up of this very important report that is being launched today. This activity was delivered several outputs: a policy review, a literature review based on issues identified by other projects on inclusive school leadership, a country survey, and what I think is very important for this, our discussion today, a policy framework, a self-reflection tool for the school leaders, and some policy messages that match a lot with the recommendations of this report. In short, I think I can highlight 3 dimensions: the role of leaders in setting a direction for the school, the organizational development in terms of what school leaders can do to have their school rethought and reconceived in order to be more inclusive, and the whole focus on human development. I will share in the chat with you a link for all these tools, so that all the participants in this webinar can also see what has been produced and see the big complementarity that has always existed between our agency and UNESCO. Diversity is normal. What is normal is that we are all different. And for this, we have to have teachers and school leaders who are prepared to work in diverse settings. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, João, for your candid and thoughtful response. As we have limited time for this webinar and more speakers to address us, I would like to ask our speakers to keep their insights a little bit short. Let's now hear from an educational leader working to advance quality inclusive education at a time when Europe is facing tremendous challenges, from conflicts, economic issues, and efforts to stay united while tackling social and environmental crises. We are delighted to have with us here today Marie-Anne Persons, Advisor of International Policy from Flemish Department of Education and Training, Belgium, and President of the Steering Committee of Education within Council of Europe. Mrs. Persons, how is the Council of Europe supporting member states to ensure inclusive education for students who have been displaced due to conflict, and what measures are being taken to ensure their integration into educational systems?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to present the perspective of the Council of Europe here. You know, of course, that the Council of Europe is the pan-European organization with 46 member states, with a core mission on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which you, of course, know of all the monitoring of conventions and charters that touch the element of the universal right to quality education. But of course, today I will talk more from the perspective of the Steering Committee for Education, which oversees the work of education that is concretely carried out by the Council of Europe. First of all, I would like to congratulate UNESCO not only for the very groundbreaking work on leadership in education as was presented in the global report, but also this particular regional report is very interesting and very relevant also for the membership of the Council of Europe, even if not the whole membership is tackled by this publication, but a lot, or let's say the overwhelming majority of your conclusions and observations do not only apply to the regions that you have analyzed, but can be also be seen in other parts of Europe. Inclusion is an extremely important topic for the Council of Europe. Back in 2013, we adopted, the Committee of Ministers adopted a recommendation on ensuring quality in education. And there, for the first time, it was completely conceptualized how inclusion in the broad sense, social inclusion, is part of every quality education. Meaning that the right to education, it has to be translated as the right to quality education. And that quality is, of course, as always, a relative concept. It's linked to the mission of education, which for the Council of Europe, just as in the UN system, is very wide. Education is there for enhancing the personal fulfillment, employability, preparing for democratic participation, civic participation, and of course, for enhancing the knowledge base of society. Now, what are we doing now for inclusion, and in particular for refugees? The Council of Europe is very well aware that, especially since the COVID crisis and exacerbated by the Ukraine crisis, that the time before 2020 will never come back. We are now in a new situation. And for this reason, the heads of state and government met in May 2023 in Reykjavik for a summit where they were thinking about how to secure a democratic future for Europe. And the ministers of education, a few months later in September, they took this seriously and they adopted a strategy for education with the title Learners First, and where they put a few action lines, so they try to streamline the many action lines to big strands, and where indeed, let's say, a whole of school approach or the whole of institution approach is very important. And that's how then school leaderships also comes in the picture. We don't see leadership as something isolated, but rather as a part of the whole democratic governance of a school, because a leader can, as was said by the previous speakers, has to collaborate, but it's also a question of listening to all the voices at school and even at the voices around the school. You asked me to speak about refugees, displaced persons. Well, this is always a constant point of attention when we prepare our action lines or legal instruments. Actually, there are two big angles. First of all is everything that has to do with recognition of qualifications and recognition of competences. And there we can, of course, refer to the very fruitful work, cooperation with UNESCO on our regional recognition convention, the Lisbon Recognition Convention, where UNESCO and the Council of Europe share the secretariat that's for higher education, and where there is even an additional protocol on refugees or qualifications of refugees and people of a refugee-like status. There is also the work on the European qualification passports for refugees, where in fact we try to avoid that refugees have to restart the whole procedure of recognition when they move from one European country to another. and we were extremely happy that that UNESCO has, let's say, taken over that model to lift it up to the global level. That's one example. The second strand that we have on refugees and newly arrived immigrants is everything that has to do with linguistic integration. The Council of Europe has a mandate on working on language education. It has it already since 1954. That's the date of the adoption of the European Cultural Convention. And so we have different strands on, for instance, linguistic integration of adult migrants, a lot of development of didactic materials, etc. And now, for the moment, we are preparing a new legal instrument, a recommendation for the Council of Ministers on the recognition of qualifications and linguistic competences of refugees. And the idea is indeed that via and through education, and you can, of course, contribute to societal integration, better acceptance, and especially also avoid the waste of talent of people, not only from an economic perspective, but also from the perspective of human dignity. And I hope that this introduction gives an idea of the centrality of the attention to refugees and people in refugee-like status in the work of the Council of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Persons. As the report tells us, we will have the greatest success when we collaborate. And this means shared leadership, where we recognize that we are not alone in trying to achieve a vision is the best possible way to achieve system-wide change. Now, we have to be on track and be very short in our next addresses by our speakers. And this brings us to our next speaker, who is Hannah Alasatari, Global Thematic Lead of Inclusive Education and Senior Education Specialist in the Education Global Practice of the World Bank. Hannah, how is the World Bank supporting leaders in the region to drive meaningful change, ensuring education systems are inclusive, resilient, and accessible to all learners?
Thank you very much, Jasna, for this question. I'm delighted to be part of this launch event and discuss the role of education leaders in different levels of the education system to drive meaningful change and ensuring education systems are strengthened so that they're inclusive, resilient, and accessible for all learners. So we really want to go for the situation where we have the situation where all learners can access, participate, and achieve in education, truly learn. I would like to briefly echo the first speaker of the panel, if I may. João Costa was congratulating UNESCO and Global Education Monitoring Report team, and I'd like to do the same about the launch of this new publication and really concretely implementing the twin track approach. We've seen the main report also looking at inclusion as one of those things that has to be mainstream. That's not an issue for some leaders, but all leaders. And then at the same time, you're having a focused approach with this particular publication looking at particular region. So kudos for all of that. I think it's always important to make a sense of what are the most important issues related to inclusive education that we should be battling with right now in different contexts. And for sure, really choosing the battles and deciding on priorities depending on the country contexts. School leadership is for sure one of these areas which does need more attention. And I would really like to call for professional and pedagogical leadership supporting all learners. This thematic area is also one area that we have included on our Inclusive Education Policy Academy and Learning Exchange Training Program, which we work with country teams depending on demand. And it is a technical training for multi-sectoral country teams that consist leaders of policymakers representing different sectors. So we have Minister of Education there, usually really, and the agency that leads the process for inclusive education. But then there are other line ministries, academia, civil society, representatives, including organizations of learners with disabilities and other minority groups. And they're really tailor-made based on the country demand. World Bank also recently launched Inclusive Education Approach paper, which will be shared on the chat for those who would like to get more information. It introduces 4 principles, and those principles really can be utilized for any minority or marginalized groups of learners. We decided to focus first on learners with disabilities because of some of the corporate commitments that the World Bank has made, but also because that seems to be one of the group of learners that colleagues in the World Bank as well as our partner countries find difficult in implementing. So this publication, Pathways to Inclusion and Equity, Disability Inclusion, really looks at how to ensure mainstreaming of disability inclusion in all education operations and analytical work, and contributing to Sustainable Development Goal, and to ensure that inclusive and equitable quality education is a reality for all. And when I think of disability inclusion, I quickly go through the 4 principles and will stay in the time frame that was given for me. So the first principle focuses on the need to identify and address the context-specific environmental social barriers. We've already talked about how inclusion is very much a contextual issue, and social and cultural elements matter. And it's really important in our country teams that we consider that where are the countries at. And sometimes it might really mean in starting with small and low-risk tasks and then phasing in larger scale interventions. So we might be thinking of conversations on inclusive education policies for others, and then for others, it might really be implementing something already more concrete. Maybe it is an example, for example, an inclusive leadership training design, or maybe identifying and scaling other innovative interventions. Our second principle focuses on the need to work towards system-wide enabling environment and quality education system. So from the point of school leadership, it is important to consider that how can the system-wide enabling environment support the reality at the school level, how health as well as social protection, transport, infrastructure, other sectors are really making sure that there is accessibility for different type of learners, and also they work together to support the school. And the twin track approach that I already mentioned here is very important with this principle. The third principle emphasizes the importance of identifying and supporting inclusive practices in the school level. We already heard Manos explaining also how it seems that autonomy is very important when thinking of an enabling environment for principles that can be inclusive. So really, this principle is also looking at how to get the human resources and finances that really make possible to arrange the required support for different learners, to make sure that the access, participation, and achievement in education for all learners is a reality. So recognizing that teachers do have a key role in advancing disability inclusion education and broader inclusion. It is something that this principle emphasizes, but it really also recognizes that without the support of the school leadership, there is little that the teachers can do. So it's very important also with that. The fourth principle reminds what we've also heard here today about the importance of learners with organizations of persons with disabilities, parents, teachers, and community members and civil society to be part of everything. We require quite a lot from school leadership, but that is the reality where they are functioning. And I think it's really the important factor is that how these kind of principles then resonate with the country context, and how can the World Bank teams and then other stakeholders really support the countries in short and longer term goals in making education systems more accessible and inclusive and resilient for all learners. I have briefly really emphasized on learners with disabilities, but of course the World Bank, as the other speakers have also mentioned, do recognize the variety of marginalized groups, and it's often very context specific as well. Previously, we have been emphasizing indigenous populations, as well as sexual and gender minorities, as well as learners with disabilities. These are the three areas that the other activities in the other sectors and units in the World Bank don't work so much on when we think of education. There are other initiatives specifically focusing on supporting immigrant learners, also looking at safe schools as well. But I will stop there so that we can go to the other speakers. Over to you.
Thank you, Hanna, for your reflections, and also very important that you have contextualized, because as we have learned in leadership, the context is what really matters. I'm thrilled to announce our next two speakers, exceptional school leaders who have dedicated their time to sharing insights on why inclusive leadership is the cornerstone of truly inclusive schools. First up, I'm delighted to have with me this afternoon Alvin Salimovsky. He's a school principal, Brakeramis Hamid, in Shuto Orizari, Skopje, North Macedonia. Alvin, we heard from Manos and Lana and heard they spoke about need for support, training, and why trust is so important for principals to find their own way to lead effectively. Your community and student body are truly unique. We'd love to hear more about what makes them special. Can you share some insight into your students' experiences and the impact of Roma Rock School in empowering students through music and education?
Thank you. As already mentioned, I am the principal of the elementary school Brakeramis Hamid. Brakeramis Hamid is based in based municipality not only in Europe but also in the world. So Roma Rock School is based in 2017, and I will speak today about the activities of Roma Rock School. It's an NGO that provides free music education. So music has the power of to heal and unite, but it can also change lives. This is exactly what we are experiencing at Roma Rock School. We are not just teaching music, we are creating a community where Roma young people from diverse backgrounds come together to discover their full potential and break down barriers. We are privileged to work with a diverse group of students. While many of our students come from the Roma community, we also have a significant number of Macedonian students. One of the unique aspects of our school is that we create mixed bands where Roma and Macedonian students collaborate and perform together. This not only strengthens intercultural understanding, but it is also fosters a sense of unity and shared purpose. As highlighted in the GEM report, education is a key driver for social inclusion and sustainable development. At Roma Rock School, we are proud to contribute to this vision by creating an environment where education and creativity merge to open doors for Roma youth and giving them the tools to shape their future. Our activities extend far beyond just music lessons. During our summer schools, training sessions, and workshops, our students have the opportunity to engage in cultural exchanges. Through the project, they travel to other European countries where they collaborate closely with students from Mitrovica Rock School, Kosovo, who come from Serbian and Albanian communities, creating an enriching multicultural experience. These experiences allow them to build strong intercultural connections, learn from one another, and challenge stereotypes. One of the most exciting aspects of our work is the creation of unique original music. While the base of our music is alternative and rock music, we proudly blend elements of Roma traditional instruments such as the clarinet, saxophone, and darbuka. These instruments play a significant role in our compositions, resulting in a fresh and innovative sound. With this, we can confidently say that we have created a completely new direction in music, one that bridges cultures and genres in a way that has never been done before. In addition to creating music, one of our goal key is to prepare students for enrollment in secondary music education. Many Roma students, despite their incredible musical talents, often lack necessary formal education in music theory, especially in solfege, which is required for exams at music schools. Roma Rock School aims to address this gap and increase the number of Roma students enrolling in music schools, thereby creating musically educated Roma who can further their education and improve their chances of employment. Our collaboration with Musicians Without Borders from Holland and Fontis Rock Academy has also been invaluable for our students. The faculty provides training and workshops led by professors and students covering topics such as sound engineering and songwriting. For example, students learn how to record a song in a studio, including setting up microphones, connecting instruments to mixers, and even mixing and mastering the final product of a song. Workshops on songwriting teach students how to generate song ideas, use rhyming techniques, and write lyrics. These experiences provide our students with essential practical skills that will serve them in their musical careers. And in the end, through collaboration, creativity, and education, we are shaping the future of music and empowering the next generation to not only succeed in their musical careers, but to build a more inclusive and harmonious society. Thank you very much, Jasna.
Alvin, thank you for sharing an inspiring example of your school. Our second school leader is Vera Balan from the Republic of Moldova. The Republic of Moldova has undertaken a deep restructuring of the system based on the collaboration with social services. Specialized support staff work locally to help include students with disabilities in schools. Vera, what is the role of school leaders in this new environment?
Dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me to participate in this wonderful webinar. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Vera Balan. I'm a Lyceum principal. We have 1,174 students in our school, so it's a big school located in a small city. One of our priorities is creating a truly inclusive educational environment, and school leaders play a key role in this process. And this is in fact something that we're also focused on at our today's webinar. Now, a few words about creating an inclusive environment. Our school has become truly accessible for all the children. We managed to create an environment where each child feels their value, feels respect. In 2012, we established a resource center for inclusive education in our Lyceum. This center provides support services to children with special education needs. As a result, these children have a possibility to develop and achieve good educational outcomes. In 2016, we launched a new phase of enhancing inclusivity in our education system. We created a new unit, the Inclusive Education Unit, which provides services for children with severe disabilities. As a result of this project, in partnership with the Lumos charity, it's a Moldovan charity, in the Petre Stefanuke Lyceum, a comprehensive support system was put in place for children with severe disabilities and complex needs. Now, my second topic today is the organization of learning process. We pay special attention to curricula and methodologies which should be adapted to individual needs of each child. The Inclusive Education Unit, depending on each child's capabilities and capacities, we provide personal assistance to children during their work in classrooms, whether it is individual or teamwork. So children go to school and they have a chance to study together with their peers and also benefit from professional assistance and support. They also participate in out-of-class activities and events. The package of services for this category of children includes individual educational assistance, such as assistance of teachers, psychologists, speech therapists and linguists, social assistance, such as personal assistance, specialized transport and free meals, and also rehabilitation services, such as physiotherapy, for example, or hydrotherapy and sensor therapy. For many of these children, social integration and preparing them for autonomous independent life is an utmost priority. And this is what our assistance program focuses on. We have thematic classes, weekly classes, where children learn to cook, take care of their clothes, evolve in public spaces. Children, accompanied by their personal assistants, go shopping. They learn to evolve in public places, choose products, pay for them. All this is organized with active involvement of their peers and volunteers. Now, it's also very important to work hand in hand with teachers. We are fortunate in our school to have great teachers. We provide regular training to them, especially in the area of inclusive education. Another priority for us is partnerships with families, because parents are a very important source of information on children, so they should be involved in decision-making and in various school activities. So we work hand in hand with parents who organize consultations and regularly inform parents on the achievements and needs of their children. In order to achieve all these results, we also establish partnership with a number of organizations, such as the Lumos charity, which I would like to deeply thank for their support. We also develop partnerships with government agencies, academic community, and suppliers of specialized services for children. We organize experience and best practices sharing sessions. Overall, I'm quite satisfied with our achievements. However, there are some outstanding issues that we're yet to tackle, such as opposition in our society, because not all the parents are prepared to accept the inclusive education idea. Now, another problem is a big number of children in classes for children with special needs, 30 to 35 children in each class. As a result, our teachers have difficulties to work in such an environment. Few methodologies dedicated to special aspects of topics. We also need to train work closely with professionals that work with children with acoustic disabilities. We also lack daycare centers for persons with severe disabilities. However, I'm convinced that together with our reliable partners, civil society, and my colleagues, we will overcome all these obstacles. In conclusion, I would like to say that our lyceum, that is the theoretical lyceum Petre Stefanuke, has been recognized as a high-quality educational establishment. We've achieved outstanding results in our work with various categories of students. We have quite a number of various award winners in contests, Olympiads, and competitions. Children with special needs really show progress in our school in a number of areas. I'm convinced that in our school, every single child has a possibility to get high-quality education and harness their potential. Thank you for your attention.
They're truly, truly inspiring for all of us. As we wrap up today's discussion, one key message seems to stand out. Inclusive education starts with strong leadership. The findings in this report highlight the critical role of school leaders in shaping a culture of acceptance, diversity, and equity in education. Their decisions, priorities, and actions determine whether every child, regardless of background, ability, or circumstance, feels valued, supported, and empowered to learn. Across Central and Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, school leaders have navigated complex reforms and political transitions. Yet their visions and resilience have helped turn inclusive education from an ideal into reality. By fostering inclusive mindsets, training teachers, engaging with families, and advocating for system-wide change, they break barriers and open doors for all learners. As we move forward, we must continue to support and invest in educational leadership that prioritizes inclusivity. When school leaders lead for inclusion, they don't just transform schools, they transform lives. Let us commit to ensuring that every child in every classroom has the opportunity to learn, thrive, and succeed. We look forward to engaging with all of you very soon as we embark on a series of national dialogues and discussion on leadership for inclusion. Thank you for being us with us today, and have a great and successful rest of the week.